Okay, welcome to the Tube podcast. We are gathered together as pastors. This is really to invite you into the pastor's office. So many times we've had such fantastic conversations, like in our office, just chatting amongst ourselves. It's been so good. At times we've just thought, oh, I wish we could just capture that conversation. Answers, we bat around the questions that you ask. We talk about theological issues that come up, practical issues that we face as pastors, but also in the church. And time and again, we've wished that we could just have you with us in the office or capture the conversation. Time and again, we wish we could invite all of you to our meal tables. Luther had his table talk, and he invited seminary students particularly, but all sorts of people to come sit around the meal table, and they had a lot of informal conversation and that you can learn so much from. So that's the purpose of this podcast, is really so that we can address issues that we don't get to address week by week in the pulpit, so that we can address the questions that you have, and so that you can kind of listen in as we discuss things. Now, it's going to be informal. We'll be talking to each other. We'll try and ignore the cameras. We'll have to get used to that, won't we? Adam especially is a bit camera shy, a little bit camera shy, but we'll put up with that. So, table talk is what we'll be doing here, but the Tube podcast, welcome. We'll get into it. Mike, you got an issue to start us off with?
Yeah. So on Sunday, you started the next section of our Genesis series, your Genesis series, the Judgment Generation, and you preached Genesis 6, 1 through 3. I'll just read it briefly.
Well done. Yes, I was going to say, what did I say?
Yeah. Genesis 6, 1 through 3, which says, "When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. So you made a lot of good points in that sermon, and that'll be something for the fellowship groups to discuss. But one of the points you made that we just thought would be worth addressing over the table talk was your point about the sons of God focusing on the attractiveness of the daughters of men. And you made a comment in the sermon that that's the spirit of the age now, is to be consumed with attractiveness, and that's often what we focus on even as Christians, and how that can be really detrimental as we're pursuing marriage. And so you just made the point that that's something we need to think about, and so we just thought, well, let's spend some time now as pastors addressing that, thinking about that, and hopefully giving some biblical insight into that issue.
Yeah, I mean, it is an issue, isn't it? It is a negative thing here. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. I mean, I don't think the Bible as a whole deprecates the idea of appreciating attractiveness. You've got a host of times. Esther comes to mind, attractive in form and appearance. I mean, it's just, she had an attractive figure. It says the same about Rachel in contrast to Leah, doesn't it? Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was attractive in form and appearance. So you've got this. What was it you said? I didn't hear.
I think Rebecca as well, right? Rebecca, when Abraham's slave met Rebecca, he saw that she was beautiful, and Isaac also found that she was very beautiful. Might be misreading.
Yeah, I mean, he kissed her before they'd even talked.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a whole different issue.
Yeah.
Not very good dating advice, by the way. Actually, it says the same about Joseph. Genesis 39 says exactly, it uses the same phrase, attractive in form and appearance. And then you got Song of Solomon, kind of celebrates delight in physical form, physical features, even. I mean, taking delight in someone's teeth. is kind of unusual, and the hair, and but there's this, everything about this other person is just delightful. And I think about that. I think about the fact that God gave us taste buds, and we can enjoy, we get to enjoy the different tastes that are available. And I guess you could say physical attractiveness is therefore, it's like the beauty of flowers. You've got the beauty of different people, and our eyes are able to appreciate the beauty. But obviously, it is a problem, isn't it? When and I think the point that I made was really having tried to describe how the different theories of who the sons of God were, and I was really setting forwards one theory that I don't think I agree with, but the points that come out of the idea that the sons of God were the godly line of Seth, and that they were making bad choices in marriage based on appearances rather than godly character. So that this is the point that Steve Lawson makes really well in his sermon on this passage, and it's a good sermon. He argues very powerfully as to why believers must not marry unbelievers, and why believers need to make choices in marriage based on godly principles rather than mere appearances. And I think that's the contrast that's being made within that view. It's just like, okay, here are godly people, and they're just trying to choose a spouse, but their criteria are they attractive? Instead of choosing based on godly appearances. So that was the kind of the point that I was making in the sermon. I don't want to say that choosing. I don't want to say that attractiveness means nothing, but I don't want to say that. I do want to reiterate that it's a foolish choice when you prioritize appearances over godly characteristics. Does that get us going? I'm sure there's a lot more we can say.
So the attractiveness there is particularly physical attractiveness in Genesis 6.
I guess so, yeah. I mean,
because I think you could argue that you could say the question isn't are they attractive, it's what is attractive to you, right? Like the Bible would be saying attractiveness is not just outward, but also inward. And if we're trying to be shaped by Scripture, then there's a sense in which physical attractiveness is a piece of the pie of what makes someone attractive, but it's not the be-all and end-all. And it should be weighed equally with other things that we should be attracted to. I'm not saying that's what Genesis 6 is getting at, but I think that just since it doesn't say attractive in form, it just says attractive.
Yes. I don't know if weighed equally is fair, but weighed given its proper place. I guess is a good way to say it. I mean, because there's a lot that could be said, and maybe we should get into that about what place physical attractiveness needs to have in the eyes of a Christian who wants to choose a spouse or consider a potential husband or wife. I mean, that's a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah. Where would you go if we were going to say we want to build out a biblical understanding of what we should be looking for?
we both
you
looked at
at?
You teach Bible survey, right? You wanna...
Yeah, I didn't say I do it well.
We've got to get this guy talking.
Yeah.
No, what's the question?
There it is. So if we're saying, what should we be attracted to as Christians?
Yeah, I know you guys are going to bring up some of the passages. Just Proverbs 31. We can bring up 1 Timothy 2, 1 Peter 3, things like that. But you mentioned Rebecca and the servant from Abraham. I was just going to pick up on that quickly. So he goes out and he's supposed to pick he is supposed to pick a wife for Isaac, and he is praying to God, and he's praying for her to be to find this one, because he has to find from a particular family, and he wants a particular type of woman. So he prays in Genesis 24 for her, and someone who will, verse 14, let the young woman to whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to your master. And then Rebecca shows up. Verse 16, that was what you were referring to. The young woman was very attractive in appearance, a maiden whom no man had known. And then she went down to the spring and filled up her jar and came up. And then from there, he asked her, please give me a drink of water to drink. And then if you just keep reading there, I won't try to read all this. He just watches her. So, he finds out, okay, she's attractive. Great. That's not a bad thing in this situation. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But then he watches the way she responds to his request. And if you just read through it, she wasn't like, oh, please don't make me do this. It was just like, yeah, she takes off, and it says it. She moves quickly. And if you look at how much she had to do, and watering all the camels, and
That's a lot of water.
yeah, she was going back and forth, and doing a lot of work. This was taking her a long time to do, but she did it without complaint. She was a servant, someone who wanted to help this man that she didn't know. And then he ends up asking her, okay, where do you come from? Oh, she's from the right family, right? Couldn't be a Canaanite, needed to be from the family of Sarah's family and all of that. So she was from the right place, she was doing the right things, and she was attractive. So when you guys talk about the balance, you have the balance of, oh, she is attractive. I think that's a good thing in this passage. But the other things are there. If it had stopped there, and then she hadn't responded right to what he said, then she wouldn't have been the one.
Or she hadn't been from the right
Or if
family.
she hadn't been from the right family, exactly. And so obviously, and he sees like, oh, this all comes together. So I think that's just a good, a decent example. That's obviously you don't have
When
to.
you could argue that the attractiveness is the extra thing, because that's the thing he doesn't pray for. He prays for her to be a servant and for her to be from the right family.
Yeah,
The attractiveness is kind of the extra.
It's the bonus, like the Lord gave Solomon riches.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Prays for wisdom.
Yeah,
and gets
prays for
riches.
wisdom,
as
gets
well.
riches. Yeah,
Yeah, that would be a pretty cool way to start as a Christian, wouldn't it? To be prioritizing the things that the Bible prioritizes.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got the non-negotiables. I mean, I've got 2 Corinthians 6 open, verse 14. Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? And this is the point that Lawson was making so well in that sermon, which is that, for a believer to marry an unbeliever is just such a transgression of everything that the Bible teaches all the way through the Bible storyline. The godly separate from the ungodly, and marriage between the godly and the ungodly has always been it's not, I'm using the word cardinal sin badly, but it's always been up there in the list of things that seems to offend God when believers choose to unite themselves with someone who is united with the world. I mean, it's just the opposite of the direction that a believer should be pursuing.
Yeah, you think of Samson, you think of Solomon.
think of Ezra with the
or Israel with the
the intermarriage and the mass divorce.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that has to be a non-negotiable, doesn't it? I mean, as Paul says, I think in 1 Corinthians 7, when he talks about widows remarrying, right towards the end of the chapter, he says, only in the Lord. verse 39, a wife is bound to her husband as long as he lives, but if her husband dies, she's free to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. I mean, it can't get clearer than that.
Yeah.
So that's like a non-negotiable. They have to be a believer. But then when you get into the area of the negotiables, the kind of, physical attractiveness, what place does it take on the scale? What you're saying, Mike, is it? I think it was you. You were saying that it just needs to be in its right order. So the priority, Proverbs 31, I guess. Charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. That's beauty is vain. How is beauty vain? Beauty is vain in that it's fleeting. The flesh, it doesn't stay so attractive as the years go by. I find myself saying this to people like a lot in church, just in personal counsel. Just saying, look, you're going to marry, but you're going to age. If you marry for attractiveness, if that's up here in your estimation, the next step is going to be that attractiveness that you had is degraded. Sometimes it can be degraded. I think of who was the guy that raped Tamar and then despised her?
Shechem, right?
Now we're exposing our past.
Shechem and all that in 36.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm confusing it. Sorry.
Oh, you're thinking of David's.
I'm thinking of David's son, Amnon,
Okay.
and he raped.
That would have been a different one.
2 Samuel 13.
All right, give it to us.
Now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And after a time, Amnon, David's sister, loved her. And then
and if you flip down, it's so. But once he's raped her, he despised her.
Yeah, in verse 15, then Amnon hated her with a very great hatred. So the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her.
And that's so interesting, isn't it? Because, I think we've probably all experienced something like that in hopefully a much lesser degree. In as much as you meet someone different, and at first they seem so attractive to you. I mean, the face looks amazing. Everything about them, you just think, wow, this person is beautiful. And then you get to know them, and it can be just a few days, or it can be a few months, or sometimes
A few minutes.
It can be a few minutes. Yeah, you get to know them, but as you get to know them, you're like, what was it that I saw in that face? I don't see the same thing in the face that I saw. And I use that. I've not found anyone yet who hasn't had that experience. I'm sure there are people out there who have not had that experience. But most people have had that experience of thinking someone was really attractive, and then a little while later, like, they don't look attractive to me anymore. Well, that's part of the vanity of beauty, isn't it? Is that it's in the eye of the beholder. So you can think someone's attractive. And what I say to people is the reverse is true. And this is part of the problem that I see in so many of even our own people who prioritize attractiveness, is that when you prioritize physical attraction, you cut yourself off from the possibility of getting to know someone in a deeper way. But the reverse of that problem is true. So people who didn't seem to be attractive can grow more and more attractive the more you get to know them.
Absolutely.
So that's where the thing of physical attraction, it just has to be lower down in the priorities of a Christian. I think
would you say, if if you're talking to a young man who wants to get married, you would say you want an excellent wife, right? In Proverbs 31
Right.
terms. So the bare minimum, I mean, that would be like the best you could have would be an excellent wife in biblical terms, right? And then you look at this, it's 22 verses. One mentions beauty and says don't put much weight in it.
Yeah.
Okay? Everything else is her wisdom, her practical strength, her dignity, the way she helps her husband. So
But the
Yeah.
crowning of it all
Yeah.
is the fear of the Lord, isn't it?
exactly.
So this is like you could say the fear of the Lord is the thing from which all those other things
Exactly.
flows. I mean, in Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom.
Right.
So then all the wisdom you see in that Proverbs 31 woman has flowed from the fact that she fears the Lord. I mean, she might not have started out quite so diligent, quite so hardworking, but if you take a slapping from Proverbs every day, it can do your work ethic a lot of good. So that it's the fear of the Lord, which you're like, does this man, does this woman really fear the Lord? If you see that, that should be like up here in the list of priorities, because everything else is going to flow from it.
Well, and the fact that fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom means fear of the Lord isn't maturity, it's the heart that will bring maturity, right? So a young, foolish, immature Christian can fear the Lord. If you see they have the fear of the Lord, you know they're on the trajectory to being that person. But you're not saying, oh, fear the Lord, that means they're put together, they're mature, they're where they need to be to receive the wisdom, to grow in godliness, and to become that person. So if you identify fear of the Lord, you've got the makings of someone the Holy Spirit can
I sometimes wonder whether I would have recommended Donna to marry me if I was her pastor, But being married to a woman who fears the Lord has had a very sanctifying influence on me, and I think some of my foolishness and the issues, I think it had a very maturing effect on me being married to Donna and getting on with it. I can't thank her enough. In that sense, you could say that a good wife can be the greatest help to the maturing of a man who truly fears the Lord,
So
and vice versa.
But let's dig into that a bit, because I think we can, from your series we did last year on the gender, what was it called? The Genesis of gender issues.
Gender
There we go.
issues, yeah.
You identified helpfully culturally there's a gap in the way men are being formed and shaped by our culture and the way women are being formed and shaped by our culture. So I think you can look, if you paint with a broad brush in general, and say a man and a woman of the same age, the age that generally people are starting to think about marriage, generally that man will be less mature.
Because of a whole bunch of cultural factors.
Factors.
Yeah.
So let's just take a couple of the things that come up when that is an issue. I've heard the argument that, well, at least he loves Jesus, so that's enough, and you should be interested in marrying him because at least he's a Christian.
That's a man who said that.
Oh, I've never heard a woman say that. Shockingly, I've never heard a woman say that.
Yeah.
And you never will.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I can say Donna really helped me to mature. I don't know if I would have. I don't know if I would have said to her, "Yeah, go ahead, get married straight away." I mean, in God's providence, we did. We got married very quickly. I think if you're marrying someone who's immature, and you can see that they're immature, you kind of want to know: does the fear of the Lord, is that really what drives them?
Right.
Because immaturity is, you would say, fixable, but a false believer, would be something, a pretender, and would be something to avoid. And a little bit of time to track that person's trajectory would not be a bad thing, would it? I mean, if you're going to make a life, I say to people a lot, like if you're buying a car, you spend a certain amount of time trying to figure out, is this car decent, or is it just has someone painted over all the cracks and given it a polish, and underneath it's a complete wreck waiting to fall apart. What you do if you don't know about cars is you find someone that's a mechanic and you take them with you. You ask them to lift I'm going to say bonnet. Does that translate for you?
Yeah.
You ask them to look under the bonnet. You ask them to listen to the engine. Not a bad idea to take enough time to dig enough. I mean, I say to people a lot that do whatever research you need to do, take whatever pains you need to take during the getting to know you phase, in order to know that this is the kind of person you want to marry. But the problem I see with regards to attractiveness is that people place attractiveness up here, and so they don't actually take the time to get to know the person down here who, if you did start looking, they may be immature. You could have two immature people over here, and there's one guy who's if you lift the bonnet or the hood for you guys, and you start looking underneath, you listen to the engine, you ride in the car and examine the suspension, you're like, I do not want to buy this car. This has got a whole load of things that are just about to go badly wrong. This is a death trap. If you took the time to get to know this guy, who may be less attractive, you could find underneath the surface there's all sorts of things that would give you hope for the future. But on the outside, it doesn't look so good. And the problem I see is just so many people are so bothered by the physical attractiveness side of things. They never take time to even get to know someone enough to see all that stuff, because you've really got to take time with someone to get to see who they're really like.
So I hear what you guys are saying. Is there a role what is it about physical attraction that someone should look at that could say something about their maturity? Right? Should they just say, oh, it doesn't matter, she can look like whatever, he can look like whatever.
Face like the back of a bus. I don't know if they say that in America.
Hey, don't talk about me.
Yeah.
I'm right here.
Do you have the back of buses in America? You don't see that many buses, do you? No. School buses, but they're not so many.
I guess I asked that question to say, on one side, we're saying, attraction is not everything. At the same time, I don't think I would say it's nothing. In that, I remember a famous pastor was asked this question, and he said, don't think about it at all, right? You don't pay any attention to attraction. It's like, that's interesting.
I hope his wife wasn't listening.
Yeah, no, I thought about that. I thought, whoa, please save him from himself. But at the same time,
I had another famous pastor say all women over 45 look the same.
Yeah.
And I thought, his wife's over 45. Ouch. I hope his wife isn't listening.
I'm sure that was anyway. But to say, I guess I bring it up to say, look, if I see a guy who's, if a guy's looking at a lady, should she, by the way she presents herself, is going to say something about her. Now, I'm not saying all made up and all, but, if you're thinking, oh, she always has a smell, or he always has a smell. And, they don't ever comb their hair. I think on a, just thinking this out in a moment, if I saw this more in a woman, I would have more pauses than a man, because women typically care more about their looks, if that makes sense. If I saw a guy and I said, oh, he doesn't really comb his hair much, I think
what we say is that dude needs a wife.
I'd say he needs to get married. If I saw a woman and I just thought, okay, I don't know what's happening here. I'd say, I think somebody needs to meet with her.
I would say that about a guy. I mean, I told some men in my time in this church, you smell.
Oh, yes.
Brother, you got to wash. You maybe need to see a doctor.
Yeah.
Just because it's an act of love. No,
Oh, yeah.
look, nobody wants to live with that.
Mm-hmm.
Read Song of Solomon. That's you'd say that's the place for attractiveness, isn't it? Is within it's to take delight in the other person within marriage. Now, I think one of I think I referred to this on Sunday, Proverbs 5, briefly. This is one of my most frequently visited passages when it comes to counseling men about what to do with their eyes. Proverbs 5:15, drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. This is Solomon to his son. He's teaching his son to be satisfied with the wife of his youth, his own wife, his first wife, his one wife. Should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets, let them be for yourself alone, and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed. Rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer, a graceful doe. Let her breasts fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love. So it's not saying you can't take delight. In fact, verse 19 says you're supposed to take delight in the anatomy of your wife. And Song of Solomon says the reverse is true. A wife in the physical appearance and anatomy of her husband. But that's for within marriage.
Yeah.
That's and then verse 20, why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman, or embrace the bosom of an adulteress? So this is what I've had to counsel myself over the years. This is what I've had to counsel so many men is, look, you see another woman's anatomy walking down the street, and it's hard not to because people are putting it on display. But you've got to tell your eyes, not mine. Mm-hmm. Not mine. It's not mine to look at. You can't help seeing it, but you can help what you do next with your eyes.
Yeah.
It's Job, isn't it? I've made a covenant with my eyes not to gaze upon a virgin. You can't help seeing, but you don't have to gaze upon. You can turn your eyes away. The shops on the other side of the street can be suddenly very interesting. Or test yourself. That man, let me look at that man's face instead. There's a man and a woman walking down the street, and she's displaying her anatomy for his pride and everyone else's envy. All right, look him in the eyes. Give him a nod. You'll be one of the few men. But my point, I guess, just because I'm going to lose my train of thought because I'm an old man. The point I was making is just it's not wrong to delight in anatomy. It's not wrong to delight in appearance, but that's for within marriage. Well, if you're going to love your spouse, you're going to want to you're going to recognize that reality for the other. 1 Corinthians 7, is that where you were just about to go?
Nope.
So 1 Corinthians 7, Paul plays this out within marriage, and he says, look, the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. In verse 3, the husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. That's talking about sexual intimacy. But within that world of sexual intimacy comes the whole area of physical attractiveness. You want your wife to be attractive for you. If you read the Bible, you realize your wife, unless she's very unusual, also has physical desires and wants you to be attractive for her. So don't let yourself go. Don't, do wash, do use something to stop the smell, do dress in a way which is appealing to your wife. Now, if you're single, you dress in a way and you wash in a way that you think the wife that you'd be interested in would appreciate.
Yeah.
And I guess it's the same for
Demonstrate a
women.
willingness to
To
accommodate.
care for yourself,
Yeah.
to accommodate. So the Proverbs 31 woman has got it together in every way, which is kind of what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're taking attention,
I
taking
used the
care of
word-
a woman.
I said attractiveness. Maybe another word would be presentable.
Yeah.
That you think about being presentable. So not so caught up in your looks that, I'm wearing low stuff and, that kind of
Not
thing.
immodest.
Yeah, not immodest. I'm trying, or I'm going to.
You were going to take us to 1 Timothy 2. That would be probably...
Was I going to take you?
Yeah, you
Yeah, go
mentioned
ahead.
it, not me.
No, I just mentioned it because
I think it would be
you
good
guys are
to,
going.
Yeah.
good to unpack. You're the Timothy guy. Come on.
How did I become this? Well, no, I mean, really, this covers a lot of things, but 1 Timothy 2:9, likewise also that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel, with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works. And so just saying, in respectable apparel, well, that can go, I believe, one or two ways. Now, obviously, he's dealing with one side of that. Don't try to draw attention to yourself and what you wear, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly attire. Not saying everybody look at me, but I think respectable can go also the other way, in that someone's not, it's almost undignified the way they're dressing. I guess either way it could still be undignified, but it could be in a way that's saying, "Oh, I don't care. I just showed up." It's like, well, that can be a distraction too, and that can be to your own. That's not presentable.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So that's in the meeting of the church, and even 1 Peter 3, when it's talking about wives and husbands who are disobedient to the word, that they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. When they see your respectful and pure conduct, do not let your adorning be external, right? The braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious, and so on. And just the thought there is, okay, for men or for either group, just asking the question, what am I attracted to? What makes this person attractive? And as you said, Tom, earlier, look, you can see somebody, a supermodel could sit down and you say, "Whoa, beautiful woman," and she talked for a few minutes and you say, "Get me out of here."
There's that deceitfulness of charm, right?
It is, yeah. And then someone can sit down and you just think, "Oh, okay, I don't know who you are, whoever you are. Hi."
So I guess the question is with attraction, right? Like what Tom was saying is someone gets beautiful and you become attracted to someone's physical beauty and you stop noticing the warning signs, right?
Yeah.
And so we
Tap
allow
into
our
that,
hearts to be knit too soon to someone who's physically attractive and blind ourselves to the things that the Bible is telling us to be wary of. And then but the reverse is also true in the sense that if you choose to be attracted to the things the Bible tells you to prioritize, the physical attractiveness there or other, whether it's there or not, will be in the right place, and that's not supposed to steer your commitment. It may be similar to Isaac. It is a blessing and it's a good thing, but when he met Rebecca, she was veiled. He didn't even see her face, right? So the sense of saying the physical beauty is great, but it certainly is secondary to these other things. And if you allow yourself, like why wouldn't you want to pursue being knit to someone based on their fear of the Lord, their godliness, their pursuit of God? Like, why does that always seem to follow as opposed to lead our, wow, I need to get to know this person more?
And I think a lot of people get themselves in trouble, and we all can. Anybody can. And once again, it's an experience that we would all have where you see someone and you think, I'm not sure about that relationship, but they're really committed. But what I'm seeing doesn't seem hidden. It seems like they should see this, but they can't see it because they've already, they're mine. And I guess my counsel to people has been and continues to be, you need to get them around people you trust. And when they're not in the room, you need to ask about that person. And just let them talk. Say, don't try to hide anything from me. If you think this is a terrible person, tell me. If you think no one should ever marry them right now, they're not in any place to get married.
It's taking the car to a mechanic before you buy it. It's
Check it out.
taking the mechanic to the car, maybe.
That is something that becomes this almost inability to speak the truth in love when you see someone's fallen head over heels for someone. And all of a sudden, you're like, well, it seems like they really care about each other. And your ability to say, I am concerned, that is love, right? And so if you are not inviting that input, then you're telling your brothers and sisters in Christ, I'm not going to receive your love. And if you're not willing to step in and give that, they might not respond well, but that's the case always when you're speaking the truth in love.
But I mean, another thing I've seen is where somebody will look at someone that doesn't have a friend or family member who's dating someone, and when they first meet them, they'll just think, or first see them, they'll just think, what's the big deal? And then they get in the room and talk to them, and they're just like, oh, I see why you're with them. Yeah, like, that's a great person. That's a great guy. That's great. And so, just that thing of being willing to say, hey, I can't trust myself in some ways because I may already like this person. I may, whatever something that is. I was drawn by their physical attraction, but I don't want to trust in that, or other things about them, how much money they make or whatever, and say, okay, I want to see them in their family, and then I want to hear them how they talk about their family when they're not with their family, right? Someone, I don't remember who said this, but someone said a woman should understand the way a man talks about his mom. If he'll talk about his mom that way, he'll talk about you that way, right? And the same thing with the other way with a woman and her dad. It's like, he's wait till they sin against them, or they don't do something, and see how they approach that, right? Oh, they never did anything for me, and I'm tired of this, and they're always running my life. What do you think is going to happen when you get married? You think you
become that authority.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be the, it's almost like pastors when someone comes in and they want to be a member, and they just trashed your other church, and you're sitting there like, okay, so this is what you're going to say about me in 6 months. And it can be a similar thing in dating, and just say you have to listen to other people, and don't trust yourself in all these areas, but poke, and not poke in a bad way, but poke in a way of kind of searching things out and trusting other people. I guess it depends on who you are, but I'm all for the, someone wants to date my daughter. Okay, let me take them out and
she's a little young right now.
Oh yeah, well yeah. But,
so let me just cut to the chase. Are we telling people in the church they need to settle?
Oh, you didn't use the settle word. You just went and used the settle.
I used the settle.
What do you mean by settle?
I mean, okay, well, let's get even more direct, right? We just said, in general, in our culture, ladies are more mature, men are less mature. Are we telling the ladies in our church who see marriage as a good thing and want to get married and see that there's not a surplus of men who are as mature as them, are we telling them settle?
My personal thought,
yes, please give me your personal thought.
It depends on, I would leave it up to the woman. It depends on if she's saying, I really want to be married, then you need to look at what's out there. Is there, and we talked about the word trajectory, right? Is there someone going in the right way? A fear of the Lord, humility, submission to the scriptures, in the church, serving the body. He loves the church, committed to that. He's kind of checking these boxes, but I'm saying, okay, either he's not overly mature and or not overly attracted to him. Well, attraction can come and go, or it can change, right? We know the whole thing about someone gets in a car wreck or whatever. So things can come and go there. But I would say to them, it depends on how bad do you really want to get married? Then you need to make sure all the things that need to be in place are in place, and have the right priorities, keep attraction in the right place. And then ask yourself, okay, how much does this mean to me? Does it mean enough to me that I would, I want to get married, I should get married, I'm going to do this? Or, you know what, there's no one that I really want to settle for. I'd say that's fine. But you have to then,
So if
say
you
in
choose
love, no
not to
complaining.
settle, no complaining.
Yeah, that's
You've chosen not to settle.
yeah. Just say no. You know what? I'm just going to keep this life, and if a type of guy that I'm, that whatever my check marks are, hopefully they're biblical. If this guy pops up, then maybe I'll change my mind. But as of now, I'll stay where I am, and that's okay. Then be okay and serve the Lord there. But if you can't, it's the 1 Corinthians 7 thing.
Right.
If you can't, then you need to make the decision that you need to
Yeah.
make. But all of this through a biblical framework, make sure they're checking the boxes that the Bible gives you to check.
You gotta put 1 Corinthians 7 in. It is better to marry than to burn with passion, as the gloss is here. But that's 1 Corinthians 7:9. If they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry. That means, listen, you have to be willing to settle. If you can't exercise self-control, if you can exercise self-control, Paul's saying it's better to be single and use your singleness to serve the Lord. If you can't, he's saying that in the context of times of great persecution. There were many other reasons why it was better to be single. The normal in the history of the world is God's design is marriage.
Right.
And he who finds a wife finds a good thing. And you're blessed. God has blessed marriage. So to have that blessing, to share in that blessing, it is normal, it's a good thing, it's right, you should want it naturally, that's fine. If you can be content, if you have the gift of singleness and you can be content, and you can control yourselves sexually, so that you're not burning with passion and struggling all the time, or even just repeatedly going through cycles of agony over it, well, great. Be single-minded for the Lord. The whole sermon I preached on that, single-minded devotion to the Lord, which you could dig out. But that's, I think 1 Corinthians 7:9 means, yes, there has to be a settling. And I would say on the level of attraction, we have to be willing to settle for two reasons. One is the moment that you marry, you have to settle. Someone more attractive can come along the next day. You could marry, and then the woman of your dreams joins the church, like literally the next week.
Which I know a couple of guys I actually went to seminary with that ended up in adulterous relationships, and one of them told his wife, "Yes, I love you, but she's the woman that was meant for me."
Yeah.
And he went and committed adultery based on that.
Yeah.
That thought of not saying, no, this is my wife.
Isn't it? That's
This is
the
my-
wickedness of Proverbs 5. That Proverbs 5 says that woman is forbidden.
Yeah.
You've got to say, not mine. So that attractive woman moves next door. That attractive woman joins the church. That attractive man, if you're a woman, just comes into your office life. Whatever it is, you've just got to be able to say, not mine. That's forbidden. That's like Joseph and Potiphar's wife. You know, how could I do this thing and sin against God? You know, it's like I couldn't contemplate it, and he's ready to run. Can I just finish the thought again? Sorry, but the I think the problem that we've got with the I ask myself this: why is it that we live in a generation that perhaps more than any other is prioritizing attraction? Well, I think, looking back, we live more than any other generation in the age of image. Right, we're confronted in our lives with endless highly attractive individuals, men and women, who are the cream of the crop, the Esthers, the Rachels, the people, the Josephs, the people attractive in form and appearance, and our eyes are saturated with them. Now, I grew up in a village, 1,000 homes on the council estate in the village where I lived, and I don't want to depreciate the people in the village, but there were not many attractive girls. Let's put it like that. There were, I can't think of more than one who stood out in the village as a beautiful girl, and everyone knew that. And there was one guy, my friend, and he was the handsome guy, and that was it. 1,000 homes, and lots of kids, and a primary school in the village, and we're all kind of figuring out where you stand on the pecking order. I knew where I stood on the pecking order. The girls were not all looking at me; they were all looking at my friend, because there was just one guy. And so you kind of had to settle. You had to adjust your expectations as to whom you thought you might have a chance with, based upon your own score, I guess, on the scale. But I think today people are just bombarded with images of highly attractive people, and we're like, we're like people who've spent their time refining their tastes for food. We've become people of very refined tastes for beauty and for attractiveness. And our expectations are set based on media and images from all over the world, where the most beautiful people are collected and put onto our phones or our screens. And then we're confronted with our choices. And that, I think that can just set people's, you can have all these young men who are looking for, well, let's not be too gruesome, but they've had their images of what a woman should look like set, in often very sinful ways, and a lot of women in similarly sinful ways, or romantic ideas given them from the movies. And yet that's not reality. It's not reality. It's not realistic for them to have those expectations for physical attractiveness. For most people, we're talking about Queen Esther, we're talking about Sarah, Rachel, really rare individuals, and they get mention. But the other side of it, which I also wanted to mention, was just the reality that the physical attractiveness, although it can be decreased by age, I often think about the comment from that very famous pastor, everyone over 45 looks the same. They don't. They don't, not to me. When my wife smiles, her whole life is in that smile. When I see her face, I smile. Why? Because I love her. Her face is her. You know, if the face reflect, there's that proverb, I'm going to butcher it. The face reflects the soul, as it were. I've completely forgotten it now. You know what I'm talking about? As in water, face reflects face.
Yeah.
How does it go?
I don't know.
All right. So the idea that the idea is that the person is reflected in their appearance, in their face, and you go, just the reality that I don't just see her face. I know she's aging. I'm aging. I look at myself in the mirror and I can see the effects of gravity and time. And that's only going to get worse. Yeah, but my appreciation for her has grown and grown and grown, and that's built into her face.
Yeah.
And so her face is attractive more to me now than it ever was. And I think that has to be said, that if you prioritize godliness in a person, so let's say you're choosing between two equal choices, one really fears the Lord, and you look under the bonnet, you examine the suspension, and you listen to the engine, and you're like, this person really loves and fears God. And they're going in a trajectory where the Holy Spirit is going to be repairing them and renovating them. This is a restoration job from fallen sinfulness, but the trajectory is sanctification. They're going to be more and more godly the more they can. If they just continue with the Lord, they're going to get more and more and more godly. And the other one, you look at it and you think, oh, this is a wreck. This actually, when I dig a bit behind the scenes, this person's not, they're not really in love with the Lord. They don't seem to be driven by God. But this one is highly attractive, and this one's not. And they're both Christians, but you're looking at that inequality of their spiritual life. If you chose the one who was not so attractive, and that person's trajectory continues in sanctification, they're going to get more. As they age, they're going to get more and more and more lovely in every way. Yes, they'll grow wrinkles. Yes, they'll sag. Yes, they'll finally look old. We look more and more like turtles as the decades go by. But they're going to get more attractive. The other person is only ever going to get uglier unless there's a complete transformation in their life. Well, you'd be foolish to marry that one, because what you're buying is just going to deteriorate.
I think the verse that comes to mind as you're talking is 1 Samuel 16:7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. And the question when you're thinking about this is, do you want to imitate man or the Lord in your assessment of people? It's not that those things aren't important, but what is the Lord focusing on? Shouldn't we be focusing on the same things, like you said, getting under the appearance?
And even at that level, you can only expect brokenness. I remember from Genesis 2, I was teaching about the life in the lost world in the garden, and you've got, okay, the two shall become one flesh. God takes two and he makes them one. And there's this amazing thing. And they're in the garden. They were both perfect. They just fit together. Adam says, whoa, when God introduces Eve to him. I think what he says is like, this, Zot, this, finally, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. It's like, this is incredible. And she must have been supermodel, the perfection, imperfection in Eden, and they just fit together. So after the fall, the illustration I gave of how marriage was designed to be was like you're two halves of a toy that just fit together. And when you everything clicks into place and you fit perfectly, and together you function. One of those plastic toys that you can pull apart and then fit back together, and you've got two halves but one whole. Mm-hmm. But after the fall, we're like two broken, beaten up halves of a toy. And we're supposed to fit together, but the bits of plastic are a bit ground. Some baby's been chewing this bit. They don't fit properly together. The best you can hope for is two broken halves of a toy that kind of you can make fit together. But sanctification is having all the rough bits kind of taken off. Yeah. So God is reshaping you, and the more you're sanctified, I mean, this is why it's so hard, the longer you go in marriage, to contemplate ever remarrying. Not that, if Donna died, not that I would say I would never remarry, but the idea of it is horrifying because we just fit. It's just like the longer we've been together, the more God sanctifies us, the more comfortable the fit. We know each other, we love each other, we bear with one another. You know the rough bits, and you know God is sanctifying them, and you've seen them change, and it's just more and more and more comfortable and lovely, and you work better together. That's how it should be. But the best you can hope for to start with is a lot of rough edges because you're both broken.
Well, I think one of the things and this is maybe this is another podcast, we've talked about what to look for in the other person, but we haven't talked about what to do about yourself so much. Yeah. Speaking of the sanctification aspect and
how to make yourself marriageable.
Yeah, well, yeah. But I mean, it's just a thing of, I think of a woman who wants to get married to a man and always think of what he has to be, what he should be, but not necessarily thinking, okay, I'm going to be his helper. I want to be the best helper I can be. So who's a guy that I will, he's going to be the one I need to submit to biblically, but I want to see the Lord do as much as possible through this man, and I want to be the biggest help to him as I can.
And vice versa.
Yeah, and the man thinking the same way. Look, I want her to be all that God wants her to be. And so I'm not just thinking, what do I get out of this? But what can I be for them that helps them be what God would have them to be? And thinking about that, and not just, are they going to satisfy me in every way? Right.
Yeah. So I think that's the question I was going to ask. Is we've basically said if we've set up what we live in, women are generally more mature, men are less mature. And we basically just said biblically there's going to be a time where if you want to get married, you might have to settle. Does that mean that all the young men in our church listening to this podcast should go to the women in the church and say, the pastor's told you to settle, here I am, take me?
If they do, I think the women should come tell us. I want names.
And addresses.
I want addresses. Yeah, and I would say to those guys, you don't go to them. Be what we're talking about. Pursue what we're talking about. And then that will work itself out, or it may work itself out.
And recognize that what we just said is you have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, yeah. And I just say to the guys, be humble enough to say, that's not me.
Yeah.
I think even as we sit here, we would say, I'm not even sure if that's me. Like, I'm thankful I'm married. I'm thankful that someone was crazy enough to do that. But I mean, right? But to say to these men, say, hey, be willing to say, hey, I do have some issues. Hey, maybe I wouldn't be the greatest guy to be married to, and
that
not
humility.
Just attraction wise, but just in my qualities, and assess yourself. What trajectory am I on? What am I portraying when I'm around the church, or obviously in your own in private? But what do people see? Oh, they see someone who shows up, sits around, talks, leaves. Right? They don't. They see someone who shows up to an event. I'll eat food. I won't bring anything, and then I'll leave. They see someone who's didn't put much into actually, once again, presentation. I just showed up. I look like I just came from the gym. Every time someone sees me, I look like I came from the gym. I'm just never thinking about presenting myself, and not out of a superficiality, but out of something on the inside saying, I want to honor God, and I want a lady that sees that I want to honor God.
Or even just, as you were saying, a woman saying, I'm going to need to submit to him. A man saying, I'm going to need to provide for this woman.
Exactly.
So do I look like and live like a man who can provide for a woman in this city, in this economy, where I have to be not just
You have opened
part-time
up a
at
whole
Sainsbury's.
podcast.
It's up for our third hour. We're gonna
Yes. But that's here I am. I love Jesus. Isn't that enough?
Yeah.
I would say
No.
no, it's not.
Well, it's not enough to live off.
No.
And there is a stark reality for, I think, a lot of ladies, because a lot of men are behind the curve, both educationally and career-wise, in all sorts of ways. Women get ahead. Let's not get into why at this point, but there are all sorts of ways in which women have got ahead of the curve in terms of career, in terms of education. They're often earning better as single people than the men. And that's a problem for a woman, because, okay, a woman in that situation does have to ask herself, am I willing to settle for less money? I would say to a woman, you got to realize money is not going to make you happy. Equality, I think that's, we really have sold our children a bucket of lies on
There's the
money.
fourth podcast.
I mean, just that
Back to that.
bucket of, we call it the bucket of
Bucket of lies.
but it's so terrible, because I think I've seen this so many times. Driven parents, very often immigrant parents who are determined that their children will succeed, have sold them. But it's not just immigrant parents. People who've born and bred here have bought the same lie. You've got to have education in order to succeed in life, in order to be successful, because you've got to have a high standard of living, because you've got to own your own home, and you've got to have 2 cars, and on it goes. Well, that list of got to haves based on money has to be negotiable. If you're look, you wouldn't be the first woman in the history of the world to give up riches for a marriage and be happy, to be raising your children, happy to be loving your husband, happy to be serving the Lord in a family with next to nothing. Your family will think you've gone mad. But in terms of God's priorities, well, having children, raising a family has to be more significant, doesn't it, than having a house and having a particular standard of living.
They will think you've gone mad, and they'll envy your joy.
Yeah, possibly. I think in time they'll envy your joy. So, but for the men, you've got to realize it is a big sacrifice for people to give up that kind of standard of living. And, if you're asking someone to do that, you really are asking a lot. It's not a sacrifice that most people will make easily. Most people do buy into that way of thinking, and they won't even look at you. And so I think from a very practical point of view, we talked about this when we talked about the work ethic in Genesis 3, as part of the curse for men, just this reality that we are to be workers. We're to be driven to extend Eden, to provide something of the beauty and bounty and blessing for those around us. But we're faced with the curse, thorns and thistles instead. It's going to be the sweat of our brow. I think a woman is going to be looking for someone, and this would be in terms of a good quality to look for under the hood. Is that man determined and pursuing a course to provide? I think that's, again, a trajectory thing, isn't it? If the man is just kind of hapless, got no plan, got no real direction, it's that question of, you look under the hood and you just see a car crash coming. You see this car is going to fall apart. You may see the car is going to fall apart financially. Well, don't buy it. Don't marry that man, because if you do, you're marrying into the crash. And you've got to support him. You've got to submit to him. But if you see the trajectory, he may be poor, but he's driven by fear of God, by love for God, to put his life right. He's on a trajectory to provide. And, well, that's a whole lot more promising, isn't it? That's a different kind of car altogether. He may not like the place it is right now, but the direction it's going is good.
I mean, none of us went to seminary thinking we would come out and go make a lot of money. Yet we did hope that we would be, would have an income. If I was in seminary, and I was when I got married, and Dana had assessed what I was making at the time as a security guard, she would have thought, there's no way we're ever going to have anything. We're not going to have not a house. We're not going to have food, right? I mean, it was seminary, but
I think there is something different, though, about the ministry, isn't there? Because you're kind of committing yourself, not knowing where you're going, and you're saying God is going to provide.
Yeah.
Because you don't.
Well, no, yeah, and that's not. I guess that's not.
You're saying,
I'm just saying,
face value assessment. Is Adam Waller going to be a provider? Not at this point.
I mean, the same thing as university.
You already
it could
worked
be a
as
university
a teacher, right?
Well, I'm taking it.
You had the potential as a fallback plan B
to do other things.
Let's say you were disqualified from ministry. You could go teach maths again. You could provide for your family.
Well, I guess and that's my point. Is simply to say, okay, I use the seminary thing, but just someone in university, and he's coming out of university, but he's going to be something particular where it's going to take more years of study. So it's going to be a 6 years of study to do this. Well, if you see this guy on year 2 of his studies, and he's not making much money, he's not doing, you say, okay, what's he going to do? But you're looking at, where does this lead? As opposed to some guy who's just like, I'm making $25,000, who cares? Somebody should marry me.
That was Donna and me. So we got married at the end of my first year, and I had another 3 years of study before I could ever earn any money. And our plan was for Donna to work. I don't know what you'd say to me as my pastors, but our plan was for Donna to work, and we had a plan B was, if she got pregnant, or if something happened, I would have worked. I'd always worked. I would have gone straight to work, and I did have some trajectory in that, showing that I could work and I could earn, and I wasn't a shirker, but I was a student. It wasn't the most attractive possibility.
That's the kind of thing where I think, like you were saying before, have another man assess the man's work ethic, because we can be pretty quick to tell you our opinion. I mean, for me, when Vanessa married me, we were in uni, but I was getting ready to be a pretty decent provider, and she was looking forward to a comfortable life in the suburbs with a house and a couple of cars, and me working and us being in the church, and then bait and switch. Hey, what if we go into ministry? And say either way, the Lord provides. And again, the key was she had seen that I had been taught to work hard, and I was going to do that either way, and I wasn't going to, like you say, shirk that responsibility.
Yeah, and just to put balance on the whole thing, or like we said, we're not saying a guy has to make a certain amount where your life has to be, you have to have a certain comfort. he should be thinking, okay, yeah, it's his responsibility to provide, but you want him serving the Lord, however that means. Now, for most men, that's not going to mean what we do. That's going to mean, teacher, plumber, roofer, whatever. Great. But it also may mean missions, right? It may mean missions in a place that's not a very comfortable place to be, right? And so you're not saying, oh, well, he has, he's got to show me that he can keep me at least here. Okay, maybe I can't be here, but he has to keep me at least here because this is my comfort level. I'm saying no. He's a man that understands his responsibilities, and he takes them serious. And I want him serving the Lord, however that means. And I want to be a helper to him in that.
And equally, the man being able to say, "Look, this is what I think I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be the lawyer.
Yeah.
We're not going to have the big house out in the country.
Yeah.
But you're not going to starve. Our kids aren't going to starve.
Yeah.
And if that means I got to go do the job no one wants to do, fine.
Or 2 or 3 jobs.
But yeah, having the guy who's always saying, no, tomorrow the business I'm going to start and then we're going to be millionaires. Okay. Even if he's a hard worker, at chasing after clouds and dreams, then, you're signing up for a bumpy ride, right?
Yeah.
But if he's saying, no, I will provide if the Lord allows me to move my body, I'm going to provide. That's I think, and a man who can honestly say, look, there's some paths that aren't open to me because of the way God's made me. So I want to be real with you. I'm not going to be this, that, or the other thing. But what I will be is this, and I'm gonna make sure.
Yeah. And even if a guy's wasted his life and his that's why he's not going to be the person that you wanted him to be. You want to know that he sees that and is repentant of it, and there's a direction now and a determination. I think basically both for men and women, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it really does boil back down to, do they really fear the Lord? Because if a guy is really fearing the Lord, you're going to see a hatred of sin. You're going to see a rejection of laziness. You're going to see a love for the church. You're going to see a love for truth. He's going to be in his word. He's going to be not just a talker, but a doer of the word. All of it flows from that, doesn't it? It's the same for a woman. If you can see that trajectory, you've got a lot of hope. And to kind of try full circle, we should probably wrap this up, shouldn't we? To bring it back to this question of attraction, I think if you can see all of that, then it's a question of prioritization, isn't it? Where are you going to put attraction on in terms of your priorities for the person that you're thinking about? And I think that is, for me, the issue. People in our generation, maybe because of the saturation of images, and in the generation gone by, it was romantic novels. Now it's it was a kind of an idealistic picture, but the picture was created in your head of this person, now it's all image driven. I think that is such a big deal, and we've just got to put that in its place, and its place is down here. And fear of the Lord and a trajectory of life that demonstrates that is up here. I think if people do that, they can choose wisely. It's not that difficult.
And you have to ask yourself, can a God who loves me and has told me marriage is a good thing not bless me through a man or a woman who's not as ideal as I wish they were?
Sure. And let's be honest. Yes, the biological clock does tick. Whether you're a man or a woman, the longer you go as a single man, the harder it gets to find a woman that would want to marry you. That's just real, so it becomes a real burden for people, and sometimes people who won't settle can end up waiting and waiting and waiting and find out they've waited too long. For the biological clock for women can tick, and it can just become harder and harder and harder to have children. Do you want a husband and to raise a family? Well, if your choices are limited, there comes a time at which you have to either choose or realize that you're choosing not to. And okay, we'll be content in all circumstances. Give thanks in all circumstances. Commit yourself. If you're going to choose not to marry from all the options that you do have, then commit yourself to pursuing contentment, serving the Lord with your singleness. God is able to make you happy as a single. He made Jesus happy as a single. He made Paul happy as a single. So it's possible, isn't it? I mean, there's another whole, maybe on the next podcast on this type of issue, we could talk about internet dating, visiting other churches, things like that, because people really do struggle with questions like that. So should I be going off in search of, if I can't find someone that meets my criteria here, should I be going off in search elsewhere? And I think this is helpful, though, to deal with the priorities in terms of attraction. That could solve a bit for a few people. Did we do it? Did we kill it? Is this episode 1?
He said, "Did we kill it?"
I don't think it's killed. I think there will be a follow-up.
Well, guys, hope that's helpful for you. If you enjoyed listening into our table talk, this is us. I was very pleased we managed to just chat, which is good. Hopefully we'll do this regularly. We'll pump out some content for you. We've already had a few meetings with individual pastors that have visited. We've recorded some of those, and we'll release those as well. From time to time, when we have guests in, we'll interview them and try to get them to input on a particular issue that they're expert in. But we'll try to get some of your questions answered as well. I hope this is a good start. All right. God bless you. That was The Tube, podcast number 1.